If you have PCOS and you feel like you've tried everything, the diets, the medications, and nothing is working, this episode may explain why. For a lot of women with PCOS, it's not that you're not trying, it's that you're only being given part of the picture. Now, if you're wondering why we're talking about PCOS on a Fibromyalgia podcast, here is why. Women with PCOS are 4 to 5 times more likely to also have fibromyalgia, which means that for many of you, this is not a separate issue. It's part of the same bigger picture. In today's conversation, we're breaking down what women with PCOS are typically told to do, why those approaches fall short, and what starts to shift when you begin listening to what your body is actually telling you. Hi, I'm your coach, Tammy Stackelhaus, and this is episode 184. Today we're talking about PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, and why so many women feel stuck trying to manage it. Over and over, I see women being given fragmented advice. Focus on hormones, lose weight, take this medication, move more, without anyone stepping back and looking at how their body's actually functioning as a whole. We see this all the time in fibromyalgia, and it's just as true with PCOS. The problem is when you're only addressing one piece, you can be putting a lot of effort in and still not see real change. Research has shown that fibromyalgia occurs in roughly 32 to 41% of women with PCOS. Now, compare that to only about 7.7% in the general population. That's about 4 to 5 times as many women. So if your symptoms don't neatly fit into one diagnosis, or if you feel like you're dealing with more than one layer of what's going on in your body, you probably are. And this conversation is especially relevant. Today's guest understands this from both sides. Lindsie Vizethann spent nearly 20 years working inside the traditional healthcare system as a nurse, where she was trained to treat symptoms with quick fixes and Band-Aid solutions. She followed the system, she checked every box, and believed she understood health until she became a patient herself. After her own diagnosis, she saw firsthand how much is missing, especially when no one is helping you understand what your symptoms are actually pointing to. Her healing journey didn't start with another prescription. It started with a question. What if this isn't all there is? Lindsie is now the host of the podcast, PCOS Unfiltered, and the author of Healing Beyond the Diagnosis. She helps women move beyond their diagnosis by understanding the messages behind their symptoms, especially those women who have felt dismissed, frustrated, or told to just live with it. In today's conversation, Lindsie and I are breaking down what's often missing in the way PCOS is approached, why so many women stay stuck even when they're doing everything that they can, and what starts to shift when you begin listening to what your body is actually telling you. Now, as always, this podcast is not meant to be medical advice, and it is definitely not a substitute for working with a qualified healthcare provider, and you'll hear Lindsie and I talk about that in the interview. Here is my conversation with Lindsie. Hi, Lindsie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, I always like to start with people's stories. And I know you have your own sort of chronic illness story, but I'd also like to dive a little bit into why PCOS. But let's start with your story first. Tell us a little bit about your background and sort of how you got here.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So I was a nurse in my previous life. I like to say, but bedside nurse, I should say, but once a nurse, always a nurse. But I was in healthcare for almost 20 years. I was a CNA even, in high school. all throughout college, in nursing school, and just, yeah, went right into nursing. So in healthcare, almost 20 years, and I saw a lot of changes. I saw a lot of things happening, and it got to a point where I just didn't feel like I was fulfilling my passion of helping people anymore. I was in the ER, and so as I tell people, ER can be a completely different beast because it's a lot of numbers, a lot of metrics, surveys, get in, get out, make sure they're happy though at the same time, make sure they feel like they're cared about. I was even on the management track when I left nursing, but I just didn't feel like I was helping the patients and even helping the team that I was leading then, even at that time. And so I've always been the fitness freak. I've done an Ironman, I've done a marathon, I've done a good number of half marathons and other races, other triathlons and everything. And I was going to a gym. It was a kickboxing gym. It was a franchise. Fell in love with it, fell in love with the community there. And I was like, I would really love to help people through fitness. And every day that I came home from work and I was unhappy, I would say something to my now husband. And I was like, why don't we just make a phone call and see what it would be like to open up a gym? And so we did.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was amazing. I mean, we had the gym for 5 years, helped a lot of people through fitness, through something I was more passionate about, but it was a different kind of stress at the same time, truly having employees of my own, like my baby, my own business. And I think that's what finally led me to my breaking point, which actually was during COVID as well. So I think that was just the tipping point because we were closed at the time.
Hmm.
And I was waking up every day with joint pain in my hands, and it was just an indescribable pain. And I was like, so of course, my first thought is, did I do something punching the bag, right?
Right.
I'm like, that's what I do, right? But we were closed, and I would wake up with this pain in the morning, and sometimes it would get better throughout the day, and um, kind of, push it off like I tend to do looking back, that's a big theme of mine is listening to your body because there were many years looking back where I did not listen to what my body was telling me. So that was one of the major signs that was the joint pain. And then in May of 2020, we were out with some friends eating pizza, and I was maybe on my second piece, and I looked at my husband and I was like, something's not right. Like my stomach was in knots. It hurt
Mm.
so bad. I looked like I was 6 months pregnant. Like I had no idea what was going on. And we had to go home, and all I could do was curl up on the couch. And that relieved it a little bit. And then next day still felt kind of off. Um, and knowing what I knew, I was like, I think this might be a gluten thing. I was like, I think this might be a reaction. My husband was traveling for the whole week following, and I was like, this will be a perfect time. I was like, I'm just going to cut it out and see what happens. And after like a day, I felt amazing. I
Wow.
was like, wow, like I'm not eating and feeling awful after I eat. Um, but I still just continued to go on. I was like, okay, I'm going to cut out gluten now then. Like everything's fine. Still not really listening to my body. And then finally in August of that year, I finally decided to see somebody, and I saw a functional medicine specialist, and my gut was a mess. I had a positive ANA diagnosed. Basically, I was not full-blown lupus in the fact of organ failure, but I was diagnosed with lupus, but we kind of caught it early enough. And then later on found out more than likely I had celiac as well. I have celiac as well, but we got my gut in check, um and yeah, and I've been, got rid of the joint pain and been doing well. So, but I mean, that was what propelled me into what I do now, because I started realizing how much nutrition played a role. Like I always, heard like, okay, yeah, fitness or whatever, health is 80% diet and 20%, exercise. And um I was like, yeah, I eat pretty well. I'm like, I'm doing pretty well. Um, but it wasn't for me. And so I started realizing like what my body really needed and using food as fuel and, support instead of like reward, a reward for things. And so when we sold the gym, I started my health coaching practice. And I should say health and nutrition, but health because I look at the whole person. I get to look at the whole person now, where I feel like in the ER is nursing, right? We're looking at one area and trying to treat that one area, the heart, the lungs, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and then even with what I was doing at the gym, it was all fitness focused. So now I truly just get to look at all of that and help somebody with all of that. And then I dove into, as I decided to specialize, I just really felt called to women with PCOS. I would see these women in the ER, and as we were saying before this, I talked to somebody even the other day, and it was like, oh my gosh, like it took me back to those days because she was saying how she ended up in the ER like once a month with abdominal pain, and they at some point started looking at her like she was a drug seeker, and I was like, yeah, like that, like I was there, like we didn't know what to do for these women, but you also would see the body image issues, and I think the anxiety and depression that they were dealing with too, even just that short time that I would be with them in ER. And then once you start doing the research, I realized like how much this community needs, needs to be heard. They need an advocate. They need to know that they can heal. There is life on the other side, and they're not limited, by that diagnosis. And so now I get to help women with PCOS.
Yes, I love that. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness. There are so many thoughts that went through my head while you were talking. But I think what you're describing there is exactly the same thing. I mean, like fibromyalgia obviously is a different illness, a different condition, but
Mhm.
like your story of figuring out what was wrong, but also you describing what it was like with PCOS and the ER and all of that, like that you could have been talking about
Oh
fibromyalgia.
yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I remember those days too, like, when someone would come in with a flare up for fibromyalgia, and same thing, like, ER, yes, like we make sure nothing is life threatening, tell you to follow up with your primary care doctor, but you would still just see what, especially women, I feel like with fibromyalgia is what we'd see, but you would just see what they were dealing with, and then we didn't have answers, and and they would keep coming back to us because their primary care doctor couldn't give them any answers, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a hard place to be in. The other thing that I wanted to mention for those of you listening, Lindsie just talked about the fact that she kind of had to get her body in the right place to get it stable so she could start doing all the other things that she needed to do. And that's exactly what last week's episode was about. So if you haven't checked it out, go check out episode 183 about the fibro hierarchy of needs. It
Oh,
is
nice.
exactly this. Like we need to, before you can start exercising, before you can start, doing so many things, like you have to have a certain amount of stability
Mhm.
in your body, in your life, right? And so a lot of times we keep trying these things and it's like banging our head against the wall. And it's really just because we're not in the right place for it, right? We
Yeah,
haven't done that foundational work. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, so let's go back to PCOS.
Mhm.
We've been saying these letters,
Yeah.
and people who have PCOS will know what we're talking about. But for everyone else, what is PCOS?
Yeah, so it's polycystic ovary syndrome. And there's usually like three criteria that a woman would need to be diagnosed. And that would be cysts on the ovaries, which is, kind of where the name comes from, although you don't actually need those to be diagnosed anymore. So I should say there's three criteria, but you only need two of the three criteria to be diagnosed. So one could be cysts on the ovaries. The other one would be elevated androgens, which are the male hormones like testosterone. Yes, we as women have, male hormones, but obviously on a different level than men. So if they're elevated in women, that can present with like acne, hair growth, especially like on the face, the back, places that you would see more in men, versus women. Um, and then irregular cycles, primarily less than like 8 a year would also, qualify as a diagnosis. So yeah, so you don't really need the cysts on the ovaries anymore. I believe that a lot of it is tied to insulin resistance. Um, and that's also why I think there's a lot more cases out there than we even realize, which again was why I felt called to this, to this topic and this specialty. Um, because I think there's so much more out there. Um, and then so yeah, so I mean the numbers say I think up to 20% of menstruating women have it.
That's a big
I would,
number.
yeah, I would venture to guess it would be like
That it's more.
30%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I
Yes.
think, partly as women, right? I mean, this happens to women about so many things, but it's
Mm.
just like, oh, you're just having a bad period.
Yeah.
Or whatever else. So for the person listening, what kinds of symptoms? I mean, obviously some you talked about, like irregular
Hmm.
cycles, growing hair where you're not usually supposed to as a woman. But what other kinds of symptoms would somebody see that might make them go to their gynecologist and say, hey, is this something we need to check for?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other big ones is weight gain, like just kind of unexplained, massive weight gain within a short amount of time, especially around the midsection, the abdomen. And then maybe once you gain the weight, if you feel like you're doing anything and everything, maybe something that worked before in the past, nothing's working, and maybe you're continuing to gain weight, that could be a huge red flag. Fatigue. I mean, yes, that can overlap with a lot of other things, but that's still a big one. The low energy to where you just really can't even hardly get through your day. And then what do? You turn to coffee and, and all these other
Sugar
things.
and
And then,
prop
yeah,
yourself up. Yep.
exactly. But yeah, fatigue is another big one. I mean, it could even be like brain fog, just feeling off. Like I think, like I said, I ignored it for a while. And yes, I didn't have PCOS, but I think that's a common theme among a lot of women is when you just feel off and you feel like something is not right, and maybe you are going to your doctor and they're telling you, well, everything's fine, but you're still just feeling like this is not normal. I mean, I've even talked to women, that have had, yes, I said like, fewer periods per year, but some have more and some have really, really heavy, painful, bleeding. That could also potentially be a sign that something, is going on.
hmm
Yeah.
And I imagine too, because this is messing with hormones, right? So would I imagine also would be things like mood
Yes.
changes
Mood
and
swings. Yeah.
anxiety, all of those
Exactly.
kinds of things. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It kind of turns into a vicious cycle because so stress, I feel like is kind of,
Yeah.
you know, at
Yeah.
the basis of it, right? That nervous system, fight or flight response that we tend to be in a lot of
hmm
the time because of the world we live in. And if we're not, being more aware of it, but that cortisol, that stress hormone can affect your insulin. Insulin affects the hormones. It just becomes this vicious cycle, really. Yeah.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. So when someone comes to you for help, what are some of the things that they will have typically tried? And obviously they're coming to you so they didn't work, but what are some of the typical things that people generally either are recommended or suggested to do or just try on their own?
Yeah. So I will tell you the one thing I don't know, and I feel like no matter what the age of somebody that I talk to, the one thing that I hear all the time is Weight Watchers. I've talked to just about every woman I've talked to, I feel like has tried Weight Watchers.
Right, because you're gaining the weight and then you can't lose it.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like, and I guess it's easier to just count points and because they don't really count calories, but the calories are in a point system or whatever. But yeah, diets like those basically is a big thing. Keto and carnivore diet has been popular. I feel like that's kind of died off a little bit, but all these different diets, right? And just nothing is working. Maybe they've seen another like nutritionist or dietitian, and I feel like a lot of those ones just kind of tell you count calories, eat less, move more, right? Um, uh, we're getting to a point where we are seeing a lot more people trying the GLP-1s, and I'm I'm like mixed in some aspects because sure, it could be good if that's going to help get you going, but at the same time, somebody needs to be doing all the other things so they can eventually get off of that and, hopefully lessen the side effects and all that. But yeah, so I am seeing more of that as well, with people coming, either they're about to go on a GLP-1 because they feel like there's no other way, or maybe they are on it and they're like, yeah, it's still time. I need to, do something else. So yeah, those are the ones I love when they're when they definitely feel like they've tried everything, because I feel like my approach is not the typical, it shouldn't be that complicated, really, is what it comes down to.
Right.
There's so much knowledge out there now, so many things. Eat this, don't eat this, eat that, like restrict this, eat more of this. It's crazy, and it just shouldn't be that way. We should just be able to eat food and enjoy it and not stress over it.
Right. And at the same time, it's also not that simple.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of research lately kind of coming through on GLP-1s and the way that they help reduce inflammation. For those of you listening, we did a podcast episode with a rheumatologist a while back about this. So I'll link to that in today's show notes. But there's obviously something going wrong in the body, right? This is what I say about fibromyalgia too. There's definitely things going wrong in your body, but also there's so much more than that. And I feel like most people out there, whether it's PCOS or lupus or fibromyalgia or whatever, like we're only looking at a piece of the puzzle instead of stepping back and seeing the whole thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you approach this differently?
Yeah, so I love this. So nervous system, I mean, I think for me, like this was the biggest thing that I learned. Like I said, COVID was my tipping point between the stress of running the gym. We were closing at the time. We had no idea, like we had all kinds of people quitting our income. We were trying to pay employees, and like no idea when we're going to reopen, plus just our own health and safety. It was crazy. So I think that's when I realized how much stress, can play a role in so much. And so that's a big part of what I do as well. And so usually the first step is just to take some deep breaths. It sounds like simple and maybe like, oh my gosh, like why didn't I think about that before? But truly just taking some deep breaths, like I usually associate it with a meal, to take like a minute, and sure there's different types of breathing techniques, that you can do. You can just take some nice big inhales and exhales, and that's fine too, because you're going to calm your nervous system, and you can't heal, you can't lose weight unless your body feels safe, unless it's, in the more of the rest and digest phase instead of fight or flight phase. So that's probably step one for me, for everybody. Another big one is actually adding before subtracting.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
right. Yeah. Again, we think when we start something, we start a diet. And I've even had people start like my program and they just want to instantly start taking stuff away. And I'm like, no, listen to me. We will get to that point. But like right now, I don't want you to take anything away. Especially, food. So yeah. So no, I actually focus on adding in. We need to flood our body with nutrients to support it in this journey. And a lot of the times the cravings, just the emotional security that we feel with food, is because we're lacking in nutrients and we're lacking in
Mm.
other areas of our life. And so that's a big one. And then also just starting to kind of do some inner work as far as like, do some reflection, sure, journaling. Some people get way turned off by that. And so I just tell them, I'm like, just take a minute, just jot down a couple ideas, because when we do some of that inner work, we start realizing we have a tie to certain foods, to certain times of the day, certain routines, that we've done for years and years probably, and mindlessly, done subconsciously. We've just continued on those patterns. And so if we just kind of open our eyes and get curious about some of that stuff, that can be a big eye opener for people and just lay the groundwork then for what's to come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you said what you did about adding things in. I mean, for one thing, having illnesses like these, life ends up shrinking anyway,
Mhm.
right? And so we don't need to give up yet another thing because we've already given up so many, right? But I also think it's so much easier to build new, good, healthy habits than
Mhm.
it is to just stop one, right? and
Yes.
and I think the more we add in those new good healthy things, it kind of just
Mhm.
sort of squeezes out the old ones,
Exactly.
and we don't
Yeah.
really even have to try that hard.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point, sure. And then for some people, if they're really not getting, many vegetables, for example, throughout the day, or much protein throughout the day, I'm like, just start with one meal, and then we can grow from there. But yes, then naturally your body's going to start kind of self-eliminating all the other things, because
Hmm.
it's going to realize like, oh, this is food. This is what I need to actually support my body and thrive. I don't need all that other stuff. Yes, completely agree.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
So as you're working on all of these things, I know you kind of start with the nervous system regulation bit of it all, but is there an order or timing or like a sequence of things where it just works better if you do it a certain way?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, everything I mentioned is usually, so I have a 90-day program that's like, my premium program. And I do have people that even go on, beyond that, but that gives them a very, very good jump start, and they learn some critical things there to be able to continue on even on their own. So everything I mentioned is kind of in those first couple weeks, basically, of the program. And then we do start removing some of the other things. And along with that, though, once you start actually reading ingredient labels, not nutrition. I'm not worried about calories. I'm not worried about, grams of whatever is in anything. I'm worried about the actual ingredients. And so looking at the sugars, looking at the gluten, learning about dairy, because dairy can be good, but there's also some dairy out there that can be bad once you start learning where it's coming from. So the idea is by the end, we do remove all of that, but then we bring it back again, kind of systematically. And by that point, a lot of people realize, like, I don't want to feel that way. Like they've, like it was my situation too. I thought you were just supposed to eat and feel like
Like that's
junk.
just how you felt after
Yeah.
you ate.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
my husband was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, you shouldn't eat and feel bad after you eat." And I was like, "No, like I did." And I think that's a lot of women that I work with out there that feel the same way. And once we start again, lay that foundation and then systematically start removing some of those things, they realize how much better they feel. And then they don't want to bring it back.
Oh,
They realize
absolutely.
it's not serving them, or they kind of raise their standards. So then by the end, okay, sure, I'm gonna have dairy, but I'm gonna like have it maybe, I'm gonna look at the quality of it, and maybe I'm gonna have it like once or twice a week, whatever it might be. A lot of people, I feel like the big one is gluten. A lot of people just leave gluten out altogether by the end of it as well.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Now, I know you're a nurse, but you're
Mhm.
not working as a nurse doing this work,
Mhm.
right? You're working as a
No.
coach.
Yeah.
So, what is Like I know with fibromyalgia, I definitely want people to have good providers on their team, right? Like I'm not a doctor, you need a good doctor. So what is that role? Like is there a place for, medications, more traditional treatment in working with PCOS beyond what you do?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like knowing what I've known from the nursing side, even just personally, the route that I've gone down, um, I do believe that there is a role for traditional medicine because that's what people know, too. But I love that like I can work with somebody that's also being treated with some traditional, medications because to me those still aren't the be all end all. You really have to truly ask yourself, is this going to be what I'm doing for the rest of my life? Am I going to be taking this medication for the rest of my life? Am I going to be, going to the doctor every whatever 6 months, for the rest of my life? Is there something more that I can be doing to maybe either get off of that medication to be able to just feel better and manage the symptoms better? Um, yeah, so I mean, I definitely feel like there is a role in that, but that's also what I do like with my podcast, I think, is just open people's eyes to what else is out there. So maybe it is a health and nutrition coach, like myself, but maybe they need a therapist of some sort,
Yes. Yeah.
there's other like, modalities out there that they might need along with just traditional, healthcare and traditional medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is like hormone replacement or adjustment, I guess might be a better word. Is that part of PCOS treatment or is
Uh,
it?
I wouldn't say that. It's more, like blood, like, so metformin is a common one, to help kind of manage, blood sugar and stuff. There are some other ones just to kind of help manage the hormones. Birth control tends to be a big one as well. These women end up on birth control, and I feel like that's 50-50 if they even have success, with that, too. There's yeah, so it's not really like a hormone replacement. It's not like hormone specific. It's more just, yeah, that just managing kind of the effects, I guess you want to say.
And I
Yeah.
think it matters for the person too, right? I mean, we're
Exactly.
really talking
Yes.
about, like I
It's
said,
so, yeah.
adjustment might be a better word because it's
Yeah.
really more about normalizing things than it is about giving you more of
Mhm.
something. I mean, in some ways, you have too much of
Yeah.
some of the hormones, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and the more I talk to women too, I mean, the presentation is just so different. There's no typical, and I think part of that is because it does get missed. It can be missed for years in some women. It, could be picked up on right away, but then they don't always get the proper treatment right away. Or I've even talked to some that because, like I mentioned, I've heard like up to 20% of menstruating women have it, up to 80% of those a lot of times are overweight or obese. Now, there are some that we're seeing the thinner, leaner PCOS cases, and I feel like those also get dismissed because, maybe they
You
have
don't
the
fit
cyst
the
on their
picture.
ovaries, yeah, but they don't fit the picture. And so then they
Yeah.
continue to have problems, and, it kind of compiles, things pile on after that because of it. Um, so yeah, it can be so specific to the person, and then also just how they respond to whatever the medication or the treatment is, as well, is just so patient specific as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So what do you wish that people really understood if they're trying all these things and it's not working, right? What do you really wish people understood about that or yeah.
Um, that they're not failing. I think it's not a willpower issue. They're not broken. It's just that they need to start listening to these messages. So if they're eating and feeling awful and they're starting to kind of put two and two together and thinking, I need to try this, next diet because this one's not working. No, they just need to start listening to what their body's actually telling them. Their body's not broken. It's just it's a messenger. It's telling them something. And that's where, like I said, I didn't have PCOS, but I think that's a theme for me, because it wasn't until my body was screaming at me that that I finally said, oh wait, yeah, something is actually wrong here. But there's so many signs, leading up to that. And I think it's, whether that's PCOS or anything else, I think we just have to kind of flip the script a little bit to realize that no, our body is telling us something.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Our bodies are always talking, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not always listening.
Yep.
And I know, for me and for a lot of my people, we kind of check out from the neck down just because we're trying to get through the day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it can be really hard to check back in again. And I think sometimes that is easier to do if you have help, because when you're doing it on your own, it can feel like you turn the volume back on and it's overwhelming, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, a support system is great, whether that means it's a community. Um, and that's where I think I've mentioned to you before, I'm part of some like PCOS Facebook communities, and um, they can get really negative really fast. It just takes one person to like comment, that something is wrong and this sucks and this diagnosis is awful and I don't know what to do. I can't get pregnant. That's another big struggle for
Yeah.
women with PCOS. And then just the comments from there just go right along with it, and everybody chimes in. And so yeah, you have to think about, do you have the right support system and the right people in your corner? Because sure, while it might feel like, okay, I have these other people that can relate to me, they may not be the right people for you. They might be hurting you more
Mm-hmm.
than you
Mm-hmm.
realize. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I think the other part of that too, something I say to my coaches all the time is that, it can be important to feel better about having fibromyalgia, but we're actually here to help you feel better. Period.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Mhm. Yeah,
Like this
that's
isn't
true.
this isn't just about helping you feel better about having fill in the blank fibromyalgia, PCOS. We're actually here to help you find ways to feel better.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, for that person then who feels like their body just isn't cooperating, they've tried everything, where would you suggest that they start? Feel free to say your book. It's okay. Lindsie has a new book
Yes.
out, by the way.
Well, yeah, you just gave me my answer. Yeah, I mean, it's true. Like, just start being your own advocate. That's fine. Go to the doctor, but like, just know that just because they're wearing a white coat, they don't have all the answers. They don't know you. They don't know your body. They don't know what you've been dealing with.
And
Um,
sometimes they don't even have ovaries.
exactly.
Just
Exactly.
saying.
So yeah. Yeah. So do some of the research that's out there. And yes, that could start with my book. Um, because there are, whether that's some studies that you pull up online and start, diving into those, whether you find books and podcasts like mine, that kind of start like opening your eyes as to like, oh yeah, like this is actually what's happening in my body, where a doctor may not explain, all of that. Yeah, I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, yeah. I think, as patients, especially with these chronic illnesses and the ones that don't get enough love out there,
Mhm.
our first job as patients, we have got to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to be the smartest person in the room,
Mhm.
because unfortunately, the person who's supposed to be the smart person in the room doesn't always know
No,
anything about
no,
what we're dealing with.
no.
So,
And they don't always have the time either, unfortunately, to,
yeah,
to actually
the
like
7 minute doctor
ask the right
appointment.
question. Yeah, so maybe that
Yeah.
means it's time to to see what else is out there and find the right provider, for you, because there are other providers that have been traditionally trained that will still spend more time with you,
Absolutely.
so,
Yeah.
but you need to make sure you're getting the time and then asking the right questions and optimizing that time, when you are with the provider. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So let's give people the name of your book, the name of your podcast, how they can find you. If there's someone listening who has PCOS or thinks they might, let's give them the resources.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my podcast is PCOS Unfiltered. Um, it's going on a year. It's like crazy, but I love it. I love, I love just sharing. I mean, it's kind of it's evolved, I will say that. It's a wide range of things. I mean, I've even had somebody on there that's talked about feng shui and how, the energy and, in your room and everything and what's under your bed can affect your healing. To more PCOS specific episodes around like insulin resistance, for example. So yeah, PCOS Unfiltered, you can find that on all the major streaming platforms. Um, and then my book is Healing Beyond the Diagnosis and Rewrite Your PCOS Story to Finally Reclaim Your Health is a subtitle. It's on Amazon and Kindle. If you have trouble, you can always search my name because I feel like that's the best way for a lot of people. And you'll find
That's
my
right.
podcast and my book there. It'll come up on
Yep.
Amazon. But otherwise I'm on, all the other Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and recently started on Substack as well. And so I'm putting out a newsletter there a couple times a week. And it's really more of just kind of it correlates with my podcast. So if you're not able to listen to the full episode, it kind of gives you a really good overview and takes like, 2 to 3 minutes to read that versus listening to the whole episode. So you can subscribe there too.
I love it. I love it. And we will have links to all of that good stuff in today's show notes. It's at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/184. I had the privilege of being on Lindsie's podcast, so we'll specifically link to that episode if you don't get enough of my voice here. But I do think it's kind of fun because I get
Oh
to be
yeah.
interviewed for a change instead of being the one
Mhm.
asking the questions. Yes, yes. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing all your good resources and your insight, Lindsie. And but as we wrap up, I would love for you to just, I don't know, speak from your heart to that woman out there who is frustrated, who's tried everything, and who may be this close to giving up.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with my message with my book and my podcast, and just know that you are not limited by that diagnosis and you're not defined by that diagnosis, whatever that diagnosis, is. Um, Unfortunately, I think when we're handed a diagnosis, a lot of times it's, this is a lifelong condition and we're just going to manage it with A, B, and C, and just because you're being told that, that doesn't mean that's how it has to be. There's so many other resources out there, so many more things you can do. And I think the first step is understanding and knowing that you are not limited and defined by that diagnosis.
Yes. Preach it, sister. Oh, if you guys have been listening to me for any length of time, you know why Lindsie and I hit it off. Like her thing is not my thing, but we sort of have the same
Realigned,
foundation
yeah.
underneath. Like
Yeah,
there is life beyond your diagnosis,
yeah.
and just
Mhm.
because you're being told this is all we can do for you doesn't mean that's all that we can do for you.
Yeah,
There's a lot more out
exactly.
there.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right, awesome. Thank you so much for being here,
Thank
Lindsie.
you.
And for you listening, hang on. I have a couple more resources I'll give you as we wrap up today. And that wraps up my conversation with Lindsie Vizethann, host of the PCOS Unfiltered podcast and author of Healing Beyond the Diagnosis. Before we wrap up, I do want to leave you with this. If you are dealing with fibromyalgia, PCOS, or anything else that feels like your body just isn't cooperating, I want you to know you are not failing. And your body, well, it might have some things going wrong. It's not broken or defective. What you heard today is a perfect example of something that we see all the time. There are real things happening in your body, but if you try to fix them without the right foundation, or in a way your body just isn't ready for yet, it won't work. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because your body isn't ready for it yet. And that's the work that people like Lindsie and I, that's the work we do. We help you understand what your body is actually asking for, understanding those messages that Lindsie talked about, so you can support your body in a way that finally allows your body to respond. Because there is a path forward, but it starts with working with your body, not against your body. If today's episode resonated with you, I have linked a few additional resources in the show notes, including that episode on the fibro hierarchy of needs and our earlier conversation on GLP-1 medications and inflammation. So you can start connecting these pieces for yourself. We'll also have Lindsie's resources linked if you need more help with PCOS. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/184 for today's show notes. And now I have this week's listener shout out for you. This message came to me from Claudia in Mexico, and she sent the message on Instagram saying, "Hi, Tammy. I just wanted to tell you I'm so happy you exist." I live in Mexico, and the kind of support system, the medical care you can access, and the information regarding fibromyalgia here is quite limited. So listening to your wonderful podcasts has been a perfect addition to my self-care routine and my work as a photographer that focuses on self-love. Thank you a million times over. Thank you so much, Claudia, for listening and for being part of this community. I'm so happy that you exist too. And I will link to your Instagram in today's show notes so people can check out your beautiful photography. And in case you aren't aware, we do have a coach who is in Mexico. So if you're looking for help, we have somebody there who can help you. And for you listening, I want you to remember this. Your body is not working against you. You're actually on the same team. She wants the same thing that you do, to feel better. Your body is always communicating with you. And if you're feeling stuck trying to figure that out on your own, you don't have to. Having the right support, someone who can help you see what's actually going on, and who can guide you in supporting your body in a way that works for you, can make all the difference. And if you're ready for that kind of support, working with a certified fibromyalgia coach can be a really powerful next step. We'll have a link in today's show notes where you can learn more and connect with someone who is trained to help you through this. Again, that's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/184. The more you learn to listen to your body and to respond to the messages your body is sending you, and the more you have the right support, the more things can start to change and to improve. All right, I will see you back here next week, and until then, start listening.